Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. If you want to have a drink with me, you have to come to one of our night events, so we can hang out. We had an event in May, and it was in Manhattan, over there by the Churro Segno. It's in the village. It's an Italian club, and we had a lot of drinks. We had beer. We had even a couple of clients that bought mistresses. That's a true story. There was one client that bought a mistress. So nighttime events are a whole lot more exciting. This is a breakfast event. Who got up like at 5 in the morning to get to come here? Blue, right there. I'm from Jersey, so I had to get a permanent visa to stay here in Long Island. I'm here a lot, and hopefully I'll be filing for my green card shortly. So we're going to do a little house cleaning. I want to give you some recognition here. First and foremost, Martin Hoffenberg. He's a lot smarter than what he looks. So take a close look at him. But he's been very helpful in putting together this venture. We started BizGro 2 years ago. My brother Sam, Marty, and I. It was kind of like an extension of a predecessor entity that was in existence in business for about 10 years. So Marty's been very helpful, bringing a lot of his knowledge and experience to the table. The second person I'd like to thank is Ellen and Jean, Ellen Volpe and Jean Brown. They're the brain trust behind ABA. Now, ABA is probably the premier business-to-business networking organization in the tri-state area. They have 13 groups, 250 members. Who here is an ABA member? All right, so there's some people who are not ABA members. The people who are not ABA members, I want you to get together with the ABA members and just network a little bit and talk to them and find out a little bit more about the organization. I was a little bit flattered because in the spirit of this whole presentation, I heard that there was a negotiation that took place this week between Jean Brown and Ellen Volpe, who are their partners. Now, as you well know, they're partners in ABA, but they're also partners in life. And they had an entanglement this week. They had a negotiation, as I'm sure this is pretty common.
Can't wait to hear this.
And someone spilled the beans. Someone actually said that, someone spilled the beans that they had this entanglement.
It wasn't me.
Don't worry, Jim, you're not in trouble for this one. I'm not going to reveal who told me this. So, here's who told me. Well, I'm not going to tell you who told me. Here's who said it. Here's what happened. I heard they had a negotiation of who was going to introduce me to the table. And they were fighting. And when I heard about this, I put my Vegas money on Ellen. And anyone who knows Ellen will probably agree with my bet. So I probably won some money. So Gene, you're the loser here.
You know what? You're the lucky one.
Yes. And I'm going to tell you, he's right. I am the lucky one. Because now Gene owes me gratitude and love, so I'm going to negotiate a free dinner or a free meal from him.
Very good point.
There you go.
You're going to get a bag of chips and a hero sandwich.
There you go. That's interesting. He's part of our training program. I guess he's lowballing me.
I want you from your chips.
Richard, I give you permission to laugh. So everyone laughed, but you didn't laugh there. Another thank you, Chris Johnson, our video guy. Say hello to Chris. Chris, extraordinarily, he's really talented. And we're putting this on tape. So this is not the event to have a mistress. This is not the event. Okay. Ellen just negotiated. I'm only on stage till 9:50 here, so before we have a break. I'd like to thank my brother, Sam Maldonado. Look in the back, right here, Sam. What's the significance of this introduction? Besides him being my partner, all the information that I'm sharing with you today, Sam knows. When Sam and I started in business, I was 22 years old. I'm 35 now, so I'm still a baby. But when I was 22, I was a grandbaby. I was really young. And Sam was 19 years old, starting out in business. And one of the things that we learned as a survival skill because we had no choice. Because when people looked at us, we had no credibility. People looked at us like, like we were absolutely crazy being in business. And one of the skills that we developed was negotiation skills. So a lot of the information we're going to share with you is street smart education. Who here has received training in negotiations at the college and university level? Interesting. Who took a class on negotiation in high school? We're in a culture where everything is negotiated at the manufacturing and distribution level. And we receive absolutely no negotiations training to prepare you for business. But then when you're in business, you find out that all you do is negotiate. So this is a critical skill. And it's a skill that can make you a lot of money. I want to take a poll in the room. Who here is a principal or an owner of a business? Raise your hand. Who is a trusted advisor, meaning you're the one of the go-to advisors? Maybe you're an attorney, maybe you're an accountant, maybe you're a consultant that entrepreneurs rely upon. Some of you are both. Who doesn't know who they are and why they're even here? We have two people raising. We can make it stand up.
Recession out there, come on.
All right, let's talk about our roles. My role is to present information, and obviously I have to behave. As you can see, Ellen just came up and can't say anything too crazy today. Here's your role as an audience. I'm going to share with you 3 rules of negotiating right now. Hopefully you have a pen and you have some paper right in front of you. I'm going to share with you 3 rules. It's going to be kind of like a movie. You ever seen a movie where they give you the end in the beginning? Like Carlito's Way, you know? Benny Blanco was killing Carlito, and it was the first scene you saw in the movie. And then everything in the movie, you're kind of thinking, how does that scene relate? And then you see the scene at the end. So I'm going to give you 3 rules. 3 rules of negotiating. And your role as an audience is, as I share with you the information, I want you to relate everything, all the information I give you, all the tactics I give you to these 3 specific rules. Rule number 1. Always demonstrate that you can walk away from a deal. He or she who can walk away wins. Remember that. Always demonstrate that you can walk away. Doesn't mean you can walk away, it's that you can demonstrate you can walk away. There's a distinction. We're going to talk about that. 2, always make a decision based on the current circumstances, how they're presented to you at the moment. Always make decisions based on the information that is presented to you at the moment. Now, what do I mean by this? Meaning, a lot of people are stuck in bad deals and bad relationships simply because of the time and money they've spent up to that period of time. So they spend a lot of time, they spend a lot of money, and then that's their rationale to continue the deal and continue the relationship. So if we cultivate a mindset that you're making a decision based on the current circumstances, you disregard the money, you disregard the time. Very important, and as we present the information, I want you to have that in mind. Rule number 3 is it's critical. Win-win negotiation is a fallacy. There's no such thing. You have all these authors and these people in deals, this business, and they talk about win-win. And my brother and I, when I was 22, my brother's 19, we quickly learned there's no such thing as win-win. So I'm going to give you a new paradigm of thought here. Here's the new paradigm. You concentrate on winning for you, right? You concentrate on winning for you while making the other side feel like they won. And we're going to talk about how that's the only 2 components you can control anyway. So you might as well just focus on that. You concentrate on winning. It's your responsibility to win while making the other side feel like they won, which means we're going to talk about some communication strategies on how to make the other side feel like they won. All right? That's pretty much the our roles here. Now I'm going to tell you, let's talk about what we're going to talk about in this program here. First step, we're going to talk about the mental inner game. It's 75% of the game. Now, it's not all the game. That's not true, because you can have the right mindset, but if you don't have the skills and you don't have the strategies and you don't know how to implement, then it doesn't mean anything anyway. So, but it is 75%, 80%, 70%, whatever it is, it's semantics. It is a big part of the game. What you tell yourself, how you see yourself, what your perspective is of life, that makes a huge difference in negotiations. We're going to talk about the mental in the game. 2, we're going to talk about the strategic setup, right? Particularly, and we're going to find out that the strategic setup is really, really important for making the other side feel like they won. How you actually set up the game before we're actually in the war. Very important. We're going to talk about some strategic setup principles. 3, we're going to talk about key principles in human behavior that govern the relationship no matter what. You could be a good person, the other side could be a bad person. You could be unethical, the other side could be unethical. We're going to talk about principles that govern the relationship whether you like it or not. It's just the reality. And we need to be aware of that so we could govern the negotiation. Finally, we're going to talk about the chess moves, the strategies, the different moves you can make. But more importantly, we're going to talk about the counter chess moves, the counter gambits. What happens when people are using strategies against you? What do? That's what we're going to talk about. Okay. Before we get into this, I want to give you a little background here. The 3 obsessions of great entrepreneurs. First, profit. What's profit? I'd like to get a definition from the audience of profit. What's profit? Can someone just lay out their philosophical approach to profit?
Revenue greater than expenses.
Revenue greater than expenses. Can anybody add to this?
What's left?
What's left?
What benefit am I getting from this?
What benefit are you getting from this? Profit. We're going to show how that ties into negotiation. But the second is service. How does service relate to profit? Want to get some audience feedback. How does service relate to profit? And more importantly, what is service? What is service? Can someone tell me, what is service?
Earning the profit.
Earning the profit. Any definitions of what is service?
Service is the result that your customer experiences when you're doing whatever it is that you do.
Customer experience. Any definitions of service?
Fulfilling a need.
Fulfilling a need.
Bringing something of value to the marketplace.
Value. You know what? I like that word. Value. In negotiations, value is what you're trading.
Exactly.
So I want you to look at service as value. Profit is the result of value being sold at a price greater than your expenses. Look at it like that. Value. Third, relationships. Definition from the audience. How does relationships tie to profit? This whole forum is nothing but a network of relationships, isn't it?
Without relationships, you wouldn't have service or profit.
Without relationships, you wouldn't even have service or profit. What else?
People by people.
People by people.
The sources of all those things.
Huh?
Relationships are the sources of all those
Sources of everything, right?
Yeah.
Also, it's the mechanism which you use to retain profit, right? The more relationships you have, the more profit there'll be long range. Now, how does negotiations tie into all this? What I'm going to impress upon you is that negotiations could make you profit just by the numbers. We'll go into that. It's a skill that teaches you how to trade value in a way that's acceptable to the other side. It's a skill. Show you how the relationship is down the road. In terms of relationship, it's really a relationship management tool at the end of the day. If you're an owner, you're dealing with customers, suppliers, and employees on a regular basis. So this is a skill that really helps you manage the relationships, good, bad, or indifferent. I want to impress upon an idea, because I don't think a lot of business people necessarily understand it fully. You make more money in negotiating than any skill, more than sales, more than marketing, more than any administrative skill you could bring to the table. You make more money negotiating than any other skill. You look at a car, $50,000 car, you get the price down to $43,000, and it took you 2 hours. How much money did you make? $7,000, right? Got the price down $7,000. Took you 2 hours. How much is that per hour? $3,500. How many activities can you engage in that's going to make you $3,500 an hour? Think about that. It's just a skill. You make a lot of money.
That's an interesting argument that's making $3,500 by spending $4,300.
You made money. I just made money because of the negotiation between Ellen and Gene. When Gene takes me out for free lunch and free dinner and free drinks, I made $200. He's going to get the bill at the end of the session. I just made some money.
That's a lot of chips.
So you make more money negotiating than any other skill, but there's actually a cell phone. You know what? I didn't go into no cell phones. Fred, you're like a rebel.
How do you get service down here? That's a big question.
You know, I didn't go into no cell phones because there is no cell phone reception. If this was a nighttime event, you'd have some angry spouses calling you and it's going to voicemail. But it's a breakfast event, so this is conservative. There's a concept here with negotiations that's important. So as we go into this stuff, I want you to keep one more thing in mind as we go into it, is that negotiations is kind of like the martial arts. The purpose of negotiating is not to go and deceive people and get over on somebody. That's not the purpose of negotiations. It's kind of like martial arts, right? Martial arts, the purpose is not to be violent and beat people up. I mean, you could do that though. And people who know, remember the Karate Kid? Who remembers that movie? You had two sides. You had the Cobra Kai, who had a whole school that was training his students to be violent using karate. And on the other side, you had Miyagi. I wish I could do the Miyagi accent, but I can't.
Come on, do it, man.
If someone could do it, though, here's your time to shine. There you go. You had Miyagi teaching Daniel's son that the purpose of karate is not violence. The purpose is peace and control and discipline. So the purpose of negotiation is not to be used for deceptive purposes or malicious purposes. I mean, certainly people are going to do it. And we're going to talk about how to handle people who do use negotiation strategy on you for deceptive purposes. But that's not the real purpose. The purpose is to problem solve. To solve problems in the relationships that you have. You're trying to solve problems with these negotiation skills. But here's the key. We're going to teach you this, and this relates to one of these rules. Remember the 3 rules as we go into this. How it relates to the rules is we're trying to help you solve problems in your favor while making the other side feel like the problem was solved in their favor. And that's how you have to look at it, because what happens? You get benefit from it, and you create a relationship that is harmonious because of the way the other side feels. Now, I want to extend this idea. Who here knows somebody who didn't take a deal that was clearly in their best interest? Who's had that experience? You have that all the time. Who here feels that if they took that deal, that person that we're talking about, they would have made out, they would have won? What was the problem?
Emotion.
Maybe they didn't feel like they were winning. So I just want, as I'm saying this, I want you to conceptualize this idea. All right, we're going to go into the mental inner game. The mental inner game. We talked about the mental inner game being 75%, 70%, 80% of the game. The mental inner game. What's the mental inner game? It's just simply how you look at yourself, how you look at the world. Negotiations is a game where your self-esteem can be quickly exposed, quickly, by others who see right through you. So one of the things you have to start conceptualizing is you have to start training your mind to think a certain way. Because if you don't train your mind to think a certain way, you're probably not going to win the game. So the mental inner game. So out of the 3 rules that I laid out to you, right? The key thing in terms of the mental inner game is related to winning. You can't win without mastering the mental inner game. Now, one of the people in the audience is Dr. Dan Schaefer. And Dr. Dan's an interesting fella because he trains athletes and business people on how to think going into their field of expertise, right? That's your major business. And what are you preparing them to do? Win. So it's similar to negotiations. Negotiations is a sport. So if you, without the mental in a game, basically you can't win. So forget about managing the other side, whether they won or not. You can't win for you. That's the importance of the mental in a game. Now let me pose the question to the audience. What are some barriers mentally that you think people might have, or even yourself? Doesn't matter. We could be honest. What are some of the mental barriers you think people have in negotiations? I'd like to hear the audience.
Insecurity.
Insecurity. About what?
About their own skills.
About their own skills.
You're not getting value.
You're not getting value in what sense?
If you're entering a deal and you don't think that you're getting value in the deal, you'd be hesitant to or not enter.
But is that a mental barrier? When I say, what's the mental barrier that would prevent you from winning in a negotiation? Bruce.
I gotta get this deal. If you don't get it, it's all over.
You have to get this deal. We're going to talk about how that's the kiss of death. That the minute that you have to get the deal, you're done before it even started. That's really good. Dan.
Not identifying your distractions.
Not identifying your distractions. That's pretty good.
So general lack of clarity about what you want, what you're willing to do, what's important, what's not important.
Lack of clarity.
Emotion, fear and distrust. You know, and there's so many people have reported after trusting people, like Madoff, for example, that people who they trusted for a long time screwed them, that they're just reluctant to do anything anymore.
This is huge. Fear and distrust. This is huge. I'm going to tell you why this is huge. Fear and distrust. See, we have to train ourselves on how to look at things the way they are. If you train yourself to look at things the way they are, that's all you need. The problem with pessimism is training someone to look at things worse than they are. And if you look at things the way that worse than what they are, then it's hard to make deals because you're going to be stagnant. Ellen.
Low self-esteem.
Low self-esteem. That's a big one. You just don't feel good about yourself. You don't see yourself as a champion. You don't see yourself as a winner.
You've been commoditized.
I like that. You've been commoditized. It's price. Everything is price. How about this? Let me pose this question to the audience. Who buys on price? Does anyone really buy on price?
Everyone thinks they do.
No. Yes, they do. That's
Oh, absolutely.
That's
Commodity.
what
Commodity price all the
makes
time.
Amazon so successful.
I think you've done a bad job of selling or negotiating with you if you've lost because of price, but people buy on price all the time.
Okay.
For commodities. Well, the problem is that sometimes people create
Right.
in their minds a
Right.
commodity, you have to
Exactly.
differentiate it.
Exactly.
Okay, could I challenge the audience if you allow me to? Ellen, I'm not going to say anything crazy. Our view is that no one buys on price. No one buys on price. What the issue is the value that's being presented. Price is only an issue in the absence of value. If the other side doesn't feel like they're receiving value, they'll jump to price. Now, what's very interesting about this is because we deal with 63 different B2B industries. We've seen all different kinds of industries. That's what BizGro Partners, that's what we do. We help B2B companies grow. Most of them are in the selling arena, in the B2B selling arena. A lot of industries have price competition issues. It's all usually when someone has an issue with price. They haven't presented a value proposition that makes the side to go forward. That's usually the issue. If price were the issue, wouldn't everybody be eating at McDonald's? But the fact of the matter is, when 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock rolls around, many of us don't go to McDonald's. We go to somewhere where we're going to receive more value. Food is a commodity, right? It's everywhere. But we choose to have more service, and we're willing to pay the difference because of the value. So if you're presenting a value proposition and price a solution or a product or a service, and price, they're already talking about price, you really haven't done a good job presenting any value. What they're telling you is, there's no value here, so we might as well talk about price.
I think more than value, if you find yourself in a commodity situation, it's because you haven't differentiated your offering properly.
Well, that's what we're talking about value. The other side doesn't perceive value. Remember we talked about the person that didn't take the deal because, you know, they would have won, but they didn't take the deal because they didn't feel like they won. So it's very similar. Now, I want to address this issue because it's a very interesting issue, and we come across this. The concept of an RFP, it's a scam. What's an RFP? Does anyone know what an RFP is? What's an RFP?
Request for proposal.
Okay. What's a request for proposal? Basically, it's a company that communicates with a bunch of suppliers and says, we need service. Why don't you guys all bid? What are they doing in the negotiation? They're setting up a negotiation. What are they doing in an RFP? They're taking the value out of it so that, and framing the issue so they can get a better what? Price. Now,
One thing you missed on there is often the deal's rigged already in advance. They know who they want the deal to go to, so the RFP process is just justifying why that guy's going to get it. And then there'll be change orders later on. He'll wind up getting double what he put in the RFP anyway, but it was all set up in advance.
all right, good point. He's basically saying it's rigged. They already have someone in mind. Now they're trying to keep the person they have in mind, or the company they have in mind, honest. Okay, here it is. BizGro comes across a lot of businesses. There's two businesses in particular that I just remember. It's in my mind. One is a limo company, and one is they sell hardware supplies, or distributor hardware supplies, and their specialty is government contracts. The government is the ultimate RFP. They're the ultimate RFP entity. They love using RFPs against their own citizens. The government is known for that. Who agrees with this?
Government's rigged.
By the way, anyone in the government contract business? Anyone gets government contracts? Okay.
Try it.
So the government is scamming you because they got an RFP. They can put out RFP. And then, of course, you should feel appreciative that the government's doing business with you, right? Government's using this concept against you. Yes. Now, I know two companies. This is what they told me. Very interesting. And these are people that are specialists in government contracts. What they say is this. They never, when an RFP is out, they never give the best price. They never look into be price competitive. They always form the proposal based on the profits they want to make. Then what they do is they present the concept that they can provide the service, they have an organization, they have delivery, they have the service, they have a high-level product or service, and that they can provide it at the level that the government wants. And they present that. Now what happens is, you might lose the first bid. You might lose the second bid, but at some point, the entity that competed on price probably won't be able to deliver what? Value. Because you can't do both. You can't give a low, low, low price and then give great value. You can't do both. It's either one or the other. So a couple of these entities had the same strategy. They would put bids out for contract over a long period of time, and at some point they'll win the bid even though they weren't the cheapest on the block. So what does that tell you about price? Again, price is only an issue in the absence of what? Value. How does that relate to negotiations? It's everything, because if you see yourself as valuable, and this is related to the mental inner game, then you won't put things in your mind about price. And you'll be way ahead of the curve. Let's talk about 4 inner game concepts that I want you to cultivate. Very, very critical. There's 4 things we could do to just improve our mindset and our belief system. 1, see yourself as a champion negotiator. See yourself as a haggler, a handler, someone who is a pain in the ASS. Who here has someone in their life that they're a pain in the ASS with? What I'm asking you to do is expand your network. Expand your network to other people. Be a little bit more particular. And don't worry about you being viewed as a pain in the butt. Because listen, you ask my brother, some of our best clients and the people we respect the most are pains in the butt. So there's nothing wrong with being a pain in the butt. Nothing wrong with it. You have to see yourself as a haggler. You have to see yourself as a deal maker. You have to see yourself as someone who likes to negotiate. You have to start liking the negotiation process. That's first step in terms of correcting the cobwebs that are in our brain. 2, negotiate all the time. Why would I say that? Why am I saying negotiate all the time? Huh? Who said that?
Habit.
I'm sorry.
Make it a habit.
Make it a habit. I like that. Make it a habit. Just party, right?
Little wins.
Little wins. If you get little wins, you start to build momentum. Ellen.
It's a muscle, you have to keep exercising.
It's a muscle that you have to keep exercising. I learned, there's an analogy here. I had a friend in college. I remember being like 19, 20 years old. It was right before I got into business. And I had a friend who was like 31, 32 years old at that time. And he wound up going to law school, wound up becoming an attorney, going to his own practice. He was extraordinarily good with women. And he wasn't handsome. And he didn't have a lot of money either. Yet every time you saw him, he was with another attractive female. So as a 19-year-old growing boy at the time, I was curious. So I asked him, why every time I see you, you're with another pretty woman? What are you doing? What do you do? So he said that one of the key components, I'm kind of making this like an intellectual concept. Obviously, we weren't talking like this back then. Just picture yourself being 19 years old and how we talk at 19. But one of the key components of getting all these women was that he said he was just a natural flirt. And that he flirted with all women, whether he was attracted to them or not. They could be older, they could be way younger, they could be heavy, they could be skinny, doesn't matter. He'd flirt with every single female. He would present his personality, his flirtatious personality with every single woman that he comes across. Now, what did that do for him when he came across an attractive female? It was a part of him. It was a part of his personality. And the attractive female, who typically gets hit on a lot, just looks at him and just sees himself as someone who's being themselves, instead of someone trying to put on an act. How does that relate to negotiating? Here we are in multi-million-dollar deals, and we're afraid to negotiate the hotel price. Here we are, we're in the midst of of deal making, and we're kind of shy about negotiating with our friends. Because remember, this is a culture where everything is negotiated at the manufacturing and distribution level. So your everyday life is not negotiations. You go to the store, you pay the price. You go to Target, you pay the price that they laid out. Typically, you go to an attorney. It's amazing. Attorneys are very effective in this regard. It's not easy to negotiate an attorney's price if you don't have the leverage. If you're in trouble, I mean, there's certain kinds of lawyers. Not with every lawyer, but certain kinds of lawyers. Like picture a criminal defense lawyer, and you're someone in business, and now you're facing 10 years in prison, and you're going into the office of a top defense lawyer. How much negotiation on price is there going to be? Who thinks there'll be a lot of negotiation, or is it going to be, or is the person who's facing jail time going to be fearful for his life? Negotiation is an afterthought.
Well, that's because of the value that the guy you're walking into his office presents.
No, it's the perceived value, and the
Perceived
thing
value.
is that mentally he's already walked in, he's out the water.
Right.
Because there's other criminal defense attorneys, you could put a negotiation together, get an RFP on them, right? But they don't face RFPs. Criminal defense attorneys, you're facing 10 years in jail. So, negotiate everything all the time. All the time. Negotiate gas if you can. It's $4.50, now we'll do $4.49. See if you can make it work. All right, here's the key. We have to overcome the fear of losing relationships. We have to stop worrying about people liking you. What happens is, a lot of people don't like negotiations because of the tussle associated with negotiations. It's kind of like a tussle. You have to kind of like a good argument or debate. And you have to kind of like it a little bit. You have to be a little bit of an instigator. Really, you can't be scared of the tussle. You can't. Because if you're scared of the tussle, what that means is that you want the other person to like you. And in negotiations, it's really not about them liking you. It's about what? What do you think it's about?
Winning.
Winning, but how about this? I'll add to that. It's about them respecting you. Who knows people that they like a lot, but they absolutely have no respect for? Who knows people like that?
I don't like that.
Who could think of a person where they like this person, but they don't really respect them? You kept your hand up a long time. Everyone has someone in their life that they, even if they don't admit it, they like them, but they don't really respect them. So negotiations is not about the other side liking you. It's about the other side respecting you. Totally different. Totally different. And how do they respect you? They respect you when you have good negotiation skills and you stand up for what you believe in. I respect Ellen. Why? Ellen, she doesn't see herself as a negotiator all the time, but you know, she is a hardcore negotiator when it comes to her groups. You can't enter her groups without answering to Ellen. Ellen has a culture in mind she wants to establish, and when there's something in the group that goes against her grain, she'll speak out. And what you don't realize, Ellen, is it's a form of negotiations. And at that point, right, you don't care if they like you or don't like you. Anything that affects the culture of the group, she'll step in and stand up for what she believes in. And what that does is that cultivates an aura of respect. And that's what you want in negotiations. You have to like the tussle. You can't be conflict adverse in negotiations. Because again, by the way, from the audience, how do you get over the mindset of being fearful of conflict in negotiations? What do you think the answer to that is? Because I know that's a big issue.
Practice it more. Do it more.
Practice it more. What else? What else is a solution?
What's the worst thing that could happen?
What's the worst thing that could happen? I like that. What's the worst thing that could happen?
Personalize it.
Depersonalize it. Talk a little bit. That's the next point. Depersonalize it a little bit.
You're bringing value. So, when you talk about win-win, there's no win-win. I don't know that there has to be win-lose,
And it's really, it's what it's talking about, there's a perception on the other side that you're bringing value and they're not really losing.
Correct.
I think we have to get over I know I have to get over my concern about winning and being too aggressive and not being liked. But I think that's
Not being liked, very key. Yes.
Being genuine.
Being genuine.
What you're saying.
Be prepared and expect conflict.
Right. How about this? Here's an idea. Why don't we just look at it like a game? Why don't we just look at negotiations as a game? Who plays racquetball or tennis or golf or some sort of competitive sport like on the weekends or something? You raise your hand, right? What sport you like?
Golf.
Golf. What's your name, by the way?
Kevin.
Kevin. Kevin. Kevin likes golf. Are you competitive with golf?
Yeah.
Okay. He's competitive with golf. In the midst of a golf game, are you worried about your competitors liking you, or are you trying to play the game to win?
I'm not worried about them liking me at all.
That's it. You just want to destroy them, right? You want to knock that ball and win. And then negotiate a free dinner like I'm negotiating with Gene right now, right?
I'm worried about them liking me later.
Well, if we look at negotiations like a game, then it's not a big deal. You know, Sam and I have been in negotiations with clients where the client hates us on Thursday and loves us on Tuesday. After an intense negotiation. And we're fighting over money. $50,000, $100,000, $200,000, $500,000, $15,000. We're usually battling over some sort of dollar, right? And we're enemies on Wednesday, and then the next week we're having drinks. It's amazing. Marty has an interesting story from childhood where he says, and Marty, just correct me, guide me here, but I'm going to paraphrase it. He says that there was a time where he had a fight with one of his friends, and he had a quarrel. Back then, Marty was a lot more aggressive than he is today. He was a powerhouse. He was fighting with his friend. They got into a fight. Then the parents got involved. So the parents get involved. Who could predict what happened to the parents?
Parents no longer talk to each other. The kids are friends the next day.
They're good, very perceptive. The parents became enemies and didn't talk to each other for years, and the kids went to go play the next week.
I just want you to know, just as we're sitting here, I became your joint venture facilitator. Because he just said, when you said you got dinner from me, he says it's just chips.
There you go.
I just said to him, if he makes you $1,200, will you pay the $200 for dinner? He said, absolutely. I just put the deal together.
You just put the deal together.
Okay, so you just got $200 dinner.
Listen, Gene is discouraged because Ellen, he didn't get a chance to introduce me, and Ellen beat him.
I'll get over it.
You'll get over it. So either or. The friends, the kids were friends. The parents are enemies, right? But the kids are friends. We'll talk a little bit later on why kids are some of the best negotiators, right? The kids are friends. Why? Because the kids didn't really take the conflict that seriously. It's just a game, and they're going back to more games. So we view negotiations as a game that needs to be played because you have to preserve what? What do you have to preserve in business? First and foremost, what do you always have to think about in business? Profit to survive. If you don't make a profit at the end of the year, you can't continue. Okay? So, what do you have to preserve? Profit. So if you just look at it as a game, then it doesn't become a big deal. And Sam and I have had countless interactions where we're enemies on Tuesday and friends the next Thursday, and having dinner, and breaking bread, and having fun, and laughing, and drinking. I've seen that so many times that I'm just at a point where we just don't take negotiations that seriously. It's not the end of the world.
Just one other thing to help you with that one. Major insurance company, every year they hire 1,000 new salespeople. At the end of the year, they're lucky to have 12 left. So they're not afraid to burn relationships in order to keep profit.
Correct. Now, we talked in the beginning, you have to be careful about balancing this too. That you have to balance, there has to be a balancing act where, because if you're really good at making, what did we talk about? First and foremost, the third rule, you have to do what? Remember, we talked about the third. What do you have to do first and foremost? What's your responsibility in negotiation? To do what? No, the first one. Win. You got to win first, right? But what's the second responsibility?
You need to make the other person feel like they can win.
Make them feel like they won. So if the relationship is burned, what did you probably didn't do a good job of? Making them feel like they won. So negotiation again. So we're going away from win-win, but don't remember that you have to make them feel like they won. So remember that. So this is the third component of the mental in the game. Now 4, and it's kind of related. Someone said depersonalize it. No relationship is that important. I mean, there's some relationships very important, kids, your son, your mother, your daughter, your immediate family. There's some relationships, friends maybe. But just keep in mind, there's really no deal, no relationship that's that important. How about this? Let me pose a question to the audience. Who's had a real important relationship fall out on them, where they were really hurt when the relationship broke up? Who's had that experience? Okay, everyone. Is everyone here? Did we survive? Are you in one piece? At the end of the day, there's some relationships that are critical, but at the end of the day, it's not that important. If we put that in our mind, then what will wind up happening is we'll preserve more relationships because we're not operating in a state of fear. Because the state of fear is what prevents us from taking risks. And there's just times where we just have to take risks. And the other side is going to threaten you with the relationship fallout. And you're just going to have to sometimes take that risk, knowing that it's probably not going to happen. And even if it were to happen, it's not the end of the world. And then oftentimes relationships come back on the table. How many here have had friends where they had a fallout with them, and 5 years later you reconnect and you become friends again, and it's like nothing happened? How many have had that experience? We can't operate out of fear because it costs us a tremendous amount of money in business by operating out of fear. Let's talk about the strategic setup. 8 concepts on how to set it all up. What's the setup related to? The setup is related to the second component that I described to you, which is making them feel like they won. You have to have that in mind as you enter into a negotiation, and the best way to do it is to set it up properly. I'm going to share with you a bunch of concepts here. First one, ask more than you expect. In every negotiation, you have to ask more than what you expect. Why am I saying this? Let me get some audience feedback. Why am I saying this?
To concede or something. You know you're going to concede something in the negotiation. So if you want to be here, you ask for yes, you finish where you want to be.
Okay, so this it extends the negotiation range. It extends it. If you're selling something for 10, and that's your bottom line number, and you go in with 10, you have no negotiating range. So, but if you ask 13, you have $3 negotiating range, right?
You might finish at 11.
You might even finish. Second point. What did he really say? What did he say? What's the second reason why you should always ask for respect? You kind of said it, but I want someone in the audience. What did he really say? You asked 13, 10 was the bottom line, but you got 11. So what is he basically saying? Someone in the audience.
Get more than you expect.
What?
Get more than you expect.
Get more. And actually, so in other words, sometimes you get it. Sometimes by asking more, you get more. That's another reason.
Say yes if you negotiate, if you ask for something?
Huh?
They might actually say yes if you ask for something.
Yes. So sometimes you get it. So the first reason is you extend the negotiation range, giving it room for them to win. Right? Sometimes you come across egotistical people. And what I mean by egotistical people, I just mean by people who pride themselves on being negotiation champions. Sam and I have clients where we know who's going to negotiate ahead of time. So when we propose something, we know we have to give them a little room because the other side sees themselves. Remember we talked about the mental in the game? They see themselves as a champion negotiator. So we're preparing. One way to strategically set it up is to ask for more than expect.
You're setting up the metrics because you have to have a way of measuring how much you're winning and how much are they winning.
Right.
You can know what they're winning if you don't have the ability to measure.
Exactly. Now, here's the third reason. Very critical. I want you to think about this because there's a third subtle reason why this principle is important. it actually enhances the perceived value of what you're selling. Just do that whole process. Remember we talked about price being only an issue in the absence of value? Well, if you ask more, then the perception is that your product or service is valuable. So we're talking about managing a perception. Now, I'll tell you a common mistake that people make. They're in a negotiation, and they say, the price is $5,000. But for you, since we like you and we want your business, Mr. Buyer, we'll give you $4,500. I want to present that as a bad mistake. Who in the audience knows why?
You're negotiating from weakness. You devalue in your product before you get to first base.
Before you even start the negotiations, you're already giving him $500 on the table. So so by the way, from a negotiation range standpoint, if I go to you, and I say 5,000, but for you 4,500, where are you starting at?
35.
Meaning now you've cut your own range before the negotiation even starts. Why? Why do people, by the way, why do people do this? By the way, who's come across this? Who's come across a salesperson who basically says 10,000, but for you we'll do 8,000? Who's come across this? When you get this, what are you thinking? What are you thinking?
It's overpriced.
Huh?
They're overpriced.
It's overpriced.
And there's more room for movement.
So it's not effective. Even with friends, don't do it. Now, here's the question. Why do people do it all the time? Why is it rampant? Why?
Fear.
Who said that?
Me.
Fear. You're afraid of losing the deal. If you're afraid of losing the deal, I'm telling you right now, you're done.
The other part of that is that you're under pressure. If you're in sales, you have quotas or whatever, it gets to the end of the month, you're going to start giving the discounts away. You're going to just to make up what you have to get.
Well, you know, that's an interesting point because what happens is, we said this in the beginning, negotiations has to be balanced out with other disciplines and other motives. So one of the key issues here is you want to make the sale, but, you know, you're under the pressure.
But that depends on the metrics on which you're being measured. So if you're being measured on profit, then it's a whole different can of worms than your, widgets.
I want to share an idea with you. Something we learned. Just because you go at a certain price doesn't mean the other side's not going to make an offer.
Right.
I mean, just because you go at 5,000 doesn't mean they're not going to offer something. I mean, if the price is really that bad, I'll just say, if someone says, 5,000 is crazy, well, what do you think it's worth? Get a position. I wouldn't pay no less than 4,200. Now you got them to stake there. Now you have a negotiation range against them. But if you say 5,000, I'll give you 4,500 because we're friends. He's starting at 4,500 and he'll offer you 3,500. But if you say 5,000, he says 5,000, that's crazy. You say, well, what do you think? Now you get an offer from him. Now you can begin a negotiation process with the cards in your favor. Instead of the cards being in his favor, him thinking that what you're providing is really not that valuable to begin with.
What do you think of those that do not want to negotiate on price? That they believe that price is what it is?
Well, first of all, if you don't want to negotiate on price, you have to be a better negotiator than someone who has a little bit more price flexibility. Who thinks that makes sense? I mean, think about it. If you have, if you don't have a lot of flexibility on price, you really have to be a good negotiator. Now, one of the things, what did we talk about? What is the thing that helps you with price issues? What do you need to do to make price a non-issue? What? Value. So again, if you're not negotiating on price, you need to be in the value business. Because if you're not in the if you're not in the price business, you're in the value business. That's it. And if you can't make a sale at your price point, what does that tell you about the value? What does that tell you? There is none, or you're not presenting the value properly. You're not making people feel like they won. Very critical component. So always ask more than you expect because 1, you might get it. 2, you extend the negotiation range. 3, you elevate the perceived value of what you're selling just through the process. And never think just because you ask high that they can't make an offer or that you'll be disregarded. That's the fear. People think that, oh, I'll lose credibility in the process. No, you won't. Because if you see that they're not going to go forward, you're just going to say, well, under what conditions do you see yourself making this deal? And now you get a position from them. All right. Second thing we could do, try to get the other person to name the price. This is an example. $5,000, they don't like the value. What do you think? It's a little overrated though. I'm always in negotiations and I say, well, what does it cost? And they say, well, what do you think? Everybody tries to get someone to name the price, right? Honestly, again, if you refer to rule number 1, then you don't really feel that bad about naming the price. So, listen, you always want to get a position from somebody, right? But that doesn't happen all the time because people think, well, you have to name the price. Well, if you have to name the price, just make sure that it's more than what you expect. And then it doesn't matter if you're the person who initially throws the first punch. I mean, think about boxers, right? There are fighters that deem themselves as counter punchers. You're going to punch them, and they're trying to measure where the punch is at, so they'll punch you back. But we all know, who knows of world champion fighters who they don't care about counter punching, they're just going after you and knocking you out. Do you think Mike Tyson cared about counter punching? He just went in there and went after his opponent. So it all comes down from the position of strength that you're coming from. And if you're asking for more than you expect, then naming the price is a little overrated, although it's something that you always want to see if you can do. Always try to get a position from somebody. All right, here's a third one. This is high level right now. This is high level. This is a self-esteem test right here. Here's the thing. Sometimes you get an offer, and you like the offer, so you take it. What did you do that was negative, that impacted the negotiations negatively? What did you really do?
Guy thinks you could have gotten it for less.
The other side thinks, wow, I offered 5 and he took 5 in a second. Maybe I should have offered him $3,500. And they'll renege on the deal using some sort of excuse why. So here's a practice. Never accept the first offer, even if you like the deal. Don't accept it. Or if you accept it, do it very reluctantly. Do it very reluctantly. You know, $10,000 sounds great. I like it, but I have to run this by my partners. And I don't know if they'll like it. Sounds like a great deal to me, but my partners may not like it. Why don't we get back? Why don't we talk next week? Who's ever been in sales? You're in a meeting, things sound great, and then they say, call me 2 weeks from now. Who's been in that situation? You go to a meeting, it's an hour-and-a-half meeting, things sound great, you think they're going to buy right there. And then they say, you know what, I'm going on vacation next week. Call me 3 weeks from now. Sometimes they're not going on vacation. Sometimes what they're doing is they're not accepting the first offer and they're extending it so they can test you. Judy.
Well, what if they're offering, you're asking for a higher price and they immediately say yes, you're saying not accept that, or only if they throw the number out and you happen to...
Say that again, I'm sorry.
If they ask the number, let's say you offer a high price, you raise it higher than you think, and they say yes, you're saying say no to that, or only if they're throwing out a number?
No. If you present the price and they say yes, that's great. But there are other issues in the negotiation too. But you know, that's different, right? What we're talking about is if someone makes you an offer, not if you make someone an offer, if someone makes you an offer and you like the deal, this is a great deal. I'm saying don't accept it, because if you accept it too fast, the other side's going to think they could have done what? Better. And we're also going to talk about that. One of the keys to getting concessions is to keep people in the negotiations long. extend the time in the negotiations because there's a chance that you'll get concessions, but you're going to have to watch that too because then there's also a chance you might give concessions that are unnecessary because you're in the negotiations.
I'm just talking about the difference about saying, yeah, I wrote this book, here, buy the book for $50, or you got my time and consult with me for $500 an hour, you're gonna have to pay my fee. Yeah, there's two negotiations there.
No,
You can buy
understood.
the book, or you can
Well,
pay my
we'll
time.
get to that. So never, and it's related. Create multiple issues in the negotiations. Now again, this is very related to never accept the first offer. Here it is. Someone makes you a deal. They offer you a price. Now you have other issues. You have delivery, you have when the service is going to be provided, you have the terms, you have the financing, you have a bunch of issues on the table, right? You're okay with all the issues. The only thing you're negotiating is price. Big mistake. If you have one issue in the negotiation, if the only issue is one issue, the negotiation might be in trouble. Why? You have one issue. He's at 10, you're at 6. There's no other issues. Why is this negotiation in trouble?
He's not invested in the deal.
There's no more value.
How about this? There's only one issue in the negotiation. Someone has to win and someone has to lose, right? Think about that. So now you're in an ego entanglement. So the key is create issues in a negotiation, even if it's not an issue, even if it doesn't represent an issue. Remember we talked about being a pain in the ASS? Gene, you know about this. You have a couple. I think I'm one of them. If Gene dies of a heart attack tomorrow, it's me and Ellen's fault.
I just want to point out, Gene is not dying of a heart attack.
because we have a doctor in the audience who's taking care of it. Here's the thing. If we create multiple issues in a negotiation, we'll have things to trade off. So if there's one issue in a negotiation, now you're in ego entanglement, and here's the concept. You may want to write this down. Here's the concept. We need to stop trying to get things from people. Stop trying to get things from people. Try to create an environment where we can give or trade off some value to the other side that's not important to us in exchange for value back. That's what we have to kind of think. Think in terms of that, and then you won't have a problem with creating multiple issues in a negotiation, even if it doesn't represent an issue for you. You look at a negotiation and there's 5 issues. Price, delivery, terms, financing, etc., right? Make an issue of 3 or 4. Take at issue 3 or 4 concepts, 3 or 4 issues in the negotiation, right? So that you can trade off for what's really important to you. Very important. And what do? You actually increase the perceived value. Always have a higher authority. Now, who's like a solo practitioner, is an advisor, has a professional type practice? Who has that? Okay. I'm going to suggest to you that in your negotiations, never be a solo artist. Always create a higher authority. You have a business card, you have a company, someone lays out a proposal, and you say, you know what, let me run that behind my team. Let me run that behind the team. Let me run this by a couple of consultants that I'm working with. Let me run this by my partners. Never claim to be a solo artist, because if you're a solo artist, they'll beat you up. So that's part of the negotiation set. Never be a solo artist. Manage expectations. This is very important. The problem in a lot of in the sales arena, the problem is that salespeople overpromise all the time. Who's come across salespeople that have overpromised? And underdeliver. Manage expectations. I think the key is, listen, no one likes to be told the truth. No one likes to be, in our service, we have some things we have to tell people up front, that things are going to take time, and it takes time to develop new business. People don't like that. And you might lose a sale or two after that, but you know what? Even if the client is a little, is it 9:50?
No, you have
okay.
18 minutes.
I have 18 minutes, don't worry. This is like a negotiation in itself. Alan's tough.
Hold any of the cards.
Alan's tough.
A lot of people looking at you to be on time.
I know. Well, I know. I have a reputation of being on time, hopefully. Manage expectations. Part of negotiation, manage expectations. Very important. It helps in negotiations later on. All right, number 7. Number 7 is like number 4. It's high level. Here, number 7. This is high level. This is for the who in the room, who here is in a business where every day is like a negotiation? Who's here? It's like in a negotiations intensive business. Okay. So you guys are advanced. So what? This is for advanced. Never seem too excited about a deal. This is now a body language principle. This is a communication principle. Even if you love the deal, try to express a level of indifference. Why is that? Why am I saying this? Who in the audience could kind of relate to this a little bit? What detriment do you bring to the table when you're a little too excited about a deal?
Well, it says maybe that the other person's not going to feel like they might have won because they're going to feel like you're so excited about it, maybe you beat the hell out of it.
Yeah, I mean, there is some of that goes on.
It's about desperation. You really need this deal, and then you take advantage of that excitement.
Well, that's the thing. What happens is if you seem too excited, then the other side starts to position themselves in terms of how they could get a good deal with you, because they figure, well, you love this deal, you want the deal, you're going to go forward, and they have an advantage on you. If you're too excited, well, you can't present value and excitement simultaneously. You know, and when I say excitement, I don't mean enthusiasm for your product or service. I'm talking about you're in the midst of making a deal and you just seem a little too excited and you kind of deplete your value a little bit. Whereas if you're a little indifferent, then now, you know, it plays out. Now, when I had that friend who was really good with the women, I did notice that, you know, even with women he was really into, he kind of always had this kind of aura of indifference to him, which was a real key principle. I saw how he managed those relationships with power because he just had this personality of indifference.
I think if you're relaxed, you give off a more confident vibration. I think that's, you know, building some, that confidence is building a relationship.
Yeah.
Feel comfortable.
See, what I'm trying to say is, it's great to be enthusiastic. I mean, I'm enthusiastic now. There are times where enthusiasm and passion really drive what you're trying to do. But what I'm saying is when you're in the midst of a transaction that's being negotiated, that's not really a time to be excited. That's a time to start to present some level of indifference. If not, you could be taken. Don't forget, not everyone we deal with is like the people in this room. I mean, I know a lot of the people in this room, and there are a lot of people, there are high-level people in this room. But unfortunately, in business, you don't face high-level people all the time, and you come across also people who are very smart and who are really looking to take advantage of you. Someone had their hands there.
Among the gazillion things I do, I teach a safe boating course with housewives. And one thing we observe and we actually teach is when somebody's buying a boat, that is a pure emotional decision. There's no rational reason to buy a boat. If someone's selling a boat, that is 100% business profit. And the buyer almost always loses. Because they're pure emotion. They're totally excited, they're getting in your boat, and they're not even thinking about what they're getting into when they sign.
Well, when we get into the strategies and the counter strategies, you're going to see how things play out.
You know, the other thing is, you might be up against a guy who's already sat through your seminar.
Mm-hmm.
And
you know, I have a little bit of a subconscious fear that some of these people in this room are going to use this against me.
you should. If he's showing emotional attachment, if you're showing emotional attachment and he sees that, he's got the upper hand because you brought emotions into the situation.
That's true. All right, more high-level stuff. Oh, this is high level right here. And you think it's not high level. Look at the negotiations you've done. Have multiple options. Always have multiple options. Now, we talked about, what's rule number 1 that I gave you? Yeah, who could recap this?
Always be willing to walk away.
Always be willing to walk away. Always be willing. Walk away power is the single most important pressure point in a negotiation. If you can convince the other side that you are prepared to walk away at any time during the negotiation, you wield power. Period. Now, That's the secret, really. That's the major secret. Out of those 3 rules, the number one most important is to be able to demonstrate walkaway power. But how do you really build away walkaway power? There's only one way to build away walkaway power. Now, there's nothing, Dr. Dan, with deference to you, there's nothing in your mind, right, that could really elevate the walkaway power to the highest level. Now, your mind is first, and you start to develop your walkaway power, starts to rise. Because your mind. If you come into a situation and you just see yourself as someone who has leverage, period, you see yourself as someone who brings value, period, you bring your walkaway power from 0 to 50. But where's the other 50 come from? Multiple options. You build your leverage, you build your walkaway power with options. Meaning, if you are buying a house, right, what you should do is buy a house that you really want, but have 2 other deals that you're ready, prepared to move on the side. So that you kind of like just as good as the first house. That you have your number 1 choice, but then you have choice 2, choice 3. And you have multiple options, right? And now you wield leverage. What's interesting is when I went to law school, I applied to like 6 schools. And it's weird that the schools and the universities kind of give the students a lot of leverage. And I always saw that as, you know, these schools must have some recruiting issues because the best schools are competing for the best students. But then you have these other, maybe 2nd-tier schools. How do they get the best students when every student is applying to like 5 or 6 or 7 schools? So kind of inherently, the applicants have leverage. And unless, of course, you're Harvard, right? And if they accept you, then they kind of have the leverage just based on their brand. But there are students, of course, that will reject the Harvard and go to somewhere else if there's another school willing to put a better deal on the table. But the school that's putting a better deal on the table have to get all types of concessions, and they're giving this one student a deal that they're not even giving other students that want to go to that school. Very interesting process when you think about it in the negotiations. So multiple options is really the key. If you're selling something, you should have a backup buyer, 2 buyers, 3 buyers. If you're a salesperson, the goal of marketing, by the way, what's the goal of marketing in business? What's the goal for marketing? What's marketing's number 1 purpose? Huh?
Sales. Create opportunities.
All right, create opportunities. In other words, create leads.
Right.
Let's jump into, so in other words, to demonstrate walkaway power, you must create options. What's the best way to have to demonstrate walkaway power, you must have leverage. What's the best way to have leverage? Have options.
Does that mean shop around?
Huh?
Does that mean shop around?
You should shop around for everything. You should know your marketplace for everything. If you're making a deal with somebody, you should have 3, 4, 5, 6 options. If you're selling a business, that's one of the things that we could do for a company, right? If you're selling a business, the seller should have multiple deals on the table if possible. That should be the goal. They should have multiple suitors. If you're a free agent in sports, what is the agent trying to basically do for the athlete? What is he trying to do? He's trying to get multiple teams interested, right? Ellen.
Oh, I'm sorry, David.
Yes.
Are you going to tell us at which point during the negotiation it's best to demonstrate that you can walk away?
Yes. We'll talk about that, yeah?
Yeah, if it's a big deal, the more powerful the deal, the more you should have a 9th, which is have a mediator or a facilitator involved. Because the facilitator will meet with both sides and have them define their BATNA, which is their best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And when each side is really locked down on what their best alternative, that could be walk away.
Well, we're going to get to that into the strategies. Let me go forward now. I don't have much time to get into the principles. I want to get into the principles. Quickly, 9 principles I want to share with you. First, the law of scarcity. Very important. The law of scarcity. This drives the negotiation. What's the law of scarcity? If something is readily available, right, and you can get it anywhere, what happens to the value? Drops. If something is not readily available, what happens to the value? Goes up. You could do things subtly in your marketing and your sales to use the law of scarcity to your advantage. Even in this venue, and it really was true, there's limited seats. So we put in our marketing, right, to get you here in to the venue, this seating is limited. Now, it was true. We're not, but I'm saying there are subtle things that you could do to present to the other side, or at least communicate to the other side subtly without being boisterous, that what you're offering is not available. And that does what to the value? Drives it up. The hooker principle. The oldest profession. Who here knows when the prostitute collects her money?
No idea.
Raise a hand. Can someone volunteer? No one wants to admit.
Come on.
You know, one thing about prostitutes is they have good cash flow. They get everything up front.
We're not all women, Julio.
There's some male hookers too. I need to get into that business. Get the money up front. Very good business when you think about the cash flow of it, right? Now, who could kind of figure this out? Why does the prostitute get her money up front? Or his money up front, as Ellen. Yes.
Afterwards, it's, you know, you don't want to pay for it anymore.
Wait. So wait, hold on. We're trying to do an exercise here. What did you say? I'm sorry. Just repeat that.
Afterwards, you don't want to pay for it anymore. It has no value after the act.
But why don't you want to pay for it? I mean, if the service was great, the experience was awesome, why do you all of a sudden don't want to pay for it?
Demand has diminished.
Huh?
Demand has diminished.
Demand has diminished.
It's a biological.
Doc.
Perceived value is generally greater than what's ultimately realized.
You know, this is a good point. Doc has it under. So basically, in the beginning, there was excitement and a high level perceived value. But once the act took place, it's kind of like an attitude. That's all? I paid a lot of money for this. Maybe I could get this service somewhere else for free. So, and I'm not going to ask anybody in this audience how they know all this. But, yeah. But here's the thing. Here's how the hooker principle works in the service business. Who's here in a service business? All right. Here's what the hooker principle is. The value of your services depreciate once the service is provided. It goes down in value because of what Doc said. That ultimately and what happens is the service is provided, and then the person who receives the service says, that's all. And it's not, even if the service can be great, but there's a rationale that takes place. I could have done better. It's human nature. So, how do we beat that? And if you're in the service business, you have to establish the price up front. If you have a deal, if you're matching two people, you have to establish the service up front. Establish the price of the service up front and collect, if you can, up front. But certainly the value is up front. Very important. Because a lot of people make deals and they provide service before establishing the value. They make deals and they hope they're going to get paid.
Do you think there's a difference between a one-time versus a long-term relationship in this principle?
Yes. Always. Even your best friend will figure out a way to somehow pay less. Absolutely. If the price is not established up front. Because if the price is established up front, these are the least contracts in your favor. Quickly go into this. Information is power. I'm going to go into, when we go over the strategies, why you should never reveal a deadline, even if there is one. Know your market, very, very related to information is power. Only be adversarial as a purpose of strategy, never out of emotion. We're going to talk about, when we go over the strategies, the emotions. I mean, really, human behavior gets driven by emotions. That's why engineers make bad salespeople. They have all the logic, and everything is driven by emotion. They're not on the ball in the selling process. Indifference is your real enemy, not objections. War is your friend. I'm going to get into that when we go into the strategies. Again, we talked about price. Price is never the issue. What's the issue? Value. Win-win does not work. We talked about that. We kind of covered why win-win doesn't work. Last two. One, never negotiate with terrorists. What's a terrorist? A terrorist is someone who's looking to demean you. A terrorist is an enemy. A terrorist is someone who clearly does not have your interest in mind. Never negotiate with a terrorist. We'll go into that with the strategies. And then finally, and I hit my mark, Ellen. Learn from the best negotiators, children and immigrants. Now, before we leave, I want to pose a question to, we're going to go for a break, 10, 20 minutes, and we're going to come back. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you the chess moves. And you're going to find a lot of value in these chess moves because it's everything after the mental part. Who in the audience, I'm going to pose, we're going to end this way. Who in the audience? Why are children and immigrants, why am I saying this? Why are children and immigrants some of the best negotiators?
Because they have no power.
They have no.
Wait. Try to, nothing to lose. If we put in our mind that we have something to lose, we're dead, right? We can't do, what kind of power can't we express if we think we have something to lose? Walk away power.
Persistence with kids.
Persistence. Remember we talked about the longer you can keep someone in negotiations, the more concessions you could get.
They never stop.
They never stop. All right, Ellen, I hit my mark. All right, this is what we're going to share now. The chess moves. We talked about the mental inner game. We spoke about the strategic setup. We talked about key principles that govern the negotiation process, no matter whether you like it or not. Now we're going to talk about the actual chess moves, but more importantly, I'm going to share with you the counter chess moves. A chess move is made, and then you have a counter chess move. There are three activities that are very similar to negotiation, and I want you to think about this. Three sports or games. One is chess. Chess is a game that is a negotiation in itself. It's negotiating for power. The second game is boxing. When you really think about it, when someone throws a punch, that opens up the door for a counter punch. And the third is baseball. The interaction between batter and pitcher is nothing more than a negotiation. They're negotiating for positioning. Those are the three sports that are most similar to negotiations. So I'm going to tell you the chess moves and the counter chess moves and describe it in some detail. Let's talk about strategy one. There's the key strategies and there's the counter gambits. All right, first things first. Test for validity. What's testing for validity? Testing for validity is kind of like counter haggling. Don't believe anyone says. Anything that someone presents to you, challenge it by either saying no or by making a counter proposal. Someone says, listen, my price is not negotiable. What should you do? Test for validity. See if it is negotiable. And there's only one way to find out if it is negotiable is to do what? Negotiate. There are certain entities that kind of build their brand so that they typically don't get tested for validity. Banks being one of them. How many times have you applied for a loan and the bank comes back with a proposal and their attitude is take it or leave it? But anyone who here deals with banks from a negotiation standpoint?
Yeah, I'm on the other side of that.
There you go. Those who really know banks well. Is that true? Could you negotiate with a bank?
That's why I'm with the credit union. The banks aren't like that.
There you go. So test for validity says that if a proposal is made, we should test it out a little bit. And sometimes the best way to test it out is extend the time in which you test the validity. Someone's angry at you, you make a proposal, they're angry, give it a little time and make the same proposal again. Dr. Dan talked about persistence. This is why children are so effective with negotiations. It's just the persistence. They're constantly testing you as a parent for validity. And that's another way to think about it, testing for validity. Huh?
How do you counteract that?
All right, let's go. Counter gambit.
Go to your room.
Test for validity back. All right? So you propose something. The price is $5,000. The other side tests for validity. Gene says, no, it's not $5,000. We're going to pay $3,000. What do I do? No, Gene. It's $5,000. Right? So now it's a battle of time. of testing for validity.
Or
So, well, one way, you could come back, you could go get multiple options, get other deals, come back, test it for more validity. Demonstrate walkaway power. But my point is, the strategy is test everything for validity, but when someone tests you for validity, test them for validity back, and it's going to be a tug of war of wills in that regard. Second strategy, make friends. Who here agrees that it's really hard to negotiate with friends? Who here that it's a little tougher to negotiate with friends and people you like than people you don't like? Now, I'm going to describe this in more detail. It's not our best friends, our family. Those are easy people to negotiate against. They know you, you know them. You quickly say, come on, cut the crap. You know, it's not someone you know and you love and no one who knows you. It's the friends who really don't know you that well. And you don't know them that well. And when you kind of interact, you're very careful in how you govern yourself and govern your behavior. And they're careful of how they govern their behavior. And you never really want to put anything out there that's embarrassing. And they don't want to put anything out there that's embarrassing. So you're kind of like friends, but you're not really friends in that they don't know everything about you. They don't know the total deal. Right? So those are the kinds of friends that are hard to negotiate against because you like them and they like you. If you have the strategy of making friends with people, it's a little easier. It gives you an advantage in the negotiation. When you like somebody, when someone likes you, you automatically position yourself not to be negotiated against. Now, I want to get some feedback from the audience. What's the easiest way to get someone to like you?
Give them a hug.
Give them a hug.
Be interested in them.
Like them.
All right, listen to them. Show interest in them. What are other strategies to get them to like you?
Be sincere.
Be sincere.
Mirror their behavior.
Mirror their behavior.
Make the money.
Make the money. So, huh?
Give them money.
Give them money.
Back to the
That goes back
A hell of a negotiation.
Right where we started.
I don't want friends that much. Point being, make friends. What's the counter gambit? Separate business and friendship. So it's not about the friendship, it's about the deal. It's about the transaction, it's about the business issue at heart. We like each other, we're friends, we can have a drink, but that has nothing to do with anything, don't take it personal. We're talking about the actual specific deals, and a deal is going to be measured based on my options. So if I could get something for $15 and you're trying to sell it to me for $30, I mean, why am I going to buy $30? Now, maybe if you sell something for $16, I like it, maybe I'll give you the dollar of friendship, and I'm not going to do anything crazy. But you'd be surprised how much how this dynamic plays out, and how that keeps people from doing what? Testing for what? Validity.
So are you saying to have a conversation about that?
Yeah.
Separating it.
Yeah. If you're in the middle of a deal, and you bring a friend into one of your business ventures, you say, listen, we're friends. But there's going to be a lot of things that are going to take place that have nothing to do with our friendship. You know, oftentimes, you know, we've even had this experience. Usually mixing friendship and business is a bad thing. It doesn't work out. It's not like family, because what we're talking about is friends, not the friends that are really tight with you, not the family. We're talking about the friends that you're kind of like friends, but you're not really friends, if you know what I mean. It might be even a little bit more than acquaintances. Acquaintances, this implies that I know you, you know me, we're friendly. You might go out with them on a regular basis. You might hang out with them on a regular basis. They're friends, but they're not friends in the way that your best friend knows you from high school. So that's a different kind of friend. And these are the friendships that help hurt negotiations. But in business, if you can make friends with people, then it positions you to avoid negotiations.
So if you're making friends with someone and you're doing a deal and they say, listen, you know, we're friends and everything, but this is business. And then what do? You go back to that, then you go back to step one, you test for validity.
You test for well, my point is,
if I say to you it's $5,000, you say I'm not paying. I got $3,000 on the table. I would go back to him and say, well, what are you going to buy it for me for? Like, the best I can do is $3,700. Take it or leave it.
Yeah.
I mean, just in a nutshell.
What I'm trying to say is this: don't let the friendship affect the deal. That's all I'm saying. In other words, don't give him any extra special treatment just because you're friends. Now, but the counter strategy is make friends with them and become entitled to the special deal. By implication. You're not going to say, I'm not going to tell Juan, right? Me and Juan are friends. He works with our business. I'm not going to tell him, listen, we're friends. You're going to give me this deal. No. But through implication, I'll get the better deal. That's the strategy. But the counter strategy is separate the two.
Everyone knows the situation they've been in where someone liked you and found a way to do business with you because they liked you. You weren't necessarily the best suited for that deal, not the best price maybe, not the best facility, whatever it might be, but they did business with you because they liked you.
It's one of the most effective strategies to avoid negotiations. There's a saying in the art of war. And in the art of war, who's read the book of The Art of War?
Never read it.
The Art of War basically states this. The smart, someone who's really intelligent, figures out a way to win without fighting.
You won the battle before it starts.
They won the battle before it starts. If you're really, really smart, you win that war without a fight. You set it up. Remember we talked about strategic setup? You set it up where you don't have to go to war. So that's what making friends is as a strategy.
I get this a lot. So my question is, when they counter gambit strategy of making friends, and they separate business and friendship, then it becomes almost a price issue right then and there. I mean, you know, you've hopefully created the value, and they know the value of the service that you provide because they know who you are and what you're about, and then they say, yeah, but I got a price $400 cheaper. Why am I going to go with you?
Well, again, if you separated business and friendship, now you're talking to your friend in a business context. Now you go back to business, right? And what's that?
Negotiate.
If you're in a price battle, what have you not presented? Back to business.
Their perception of your value.
Right. Well,
So then the issue is not the friendship, the issue is their perception of your value. You have to go back to that.
I think you're in that situation, Gary, it's where he's putting the value of the friendship into the value of your services. And that becomes the task or the challenge you have of separating yourself.
I think
Yeah.
you have to ask, if I was in your position and it's a friend, all right, we went through this and you're negotiating, it's like, okay, so do you perceive that as a better value than what I can give you? And I would just ask him point blank, you're calling me a friend, but you're trying to gouge me in this or get a better deal.
Wow, that's negotiation.
No, but you see, I mean, but I would turn it around. It's like, why would, you're using it one way. Let me, again, revalidate this.
well, I think that goes back to like the, you know, for me, I have to try all the time to avoid being commoditized.
Yeah.
So, you know, and a lot of times people naturally go into that place.
Yeah.
And I try to bring them out of it.
Well, they go to you. First of all, their strategy is we're friends.
Right.
So they're doing make friends against you, right? So then you're like, well, we're friends, but we got to separate this out. Now you go back to the value. You're battling with them. You're presenting value. They're trying to get you on price. You're trying to present value. It's a tug of war.
Gotcha.
Let's say, want to get through some of these strategies. What I want you to do is write down some questions, and then we'll have a whole Q&A. We'll just do questions. And also, when we do the Q&A, I want you to present some negotiations that you're currently involved, so we get the audience involved. We all come up with some solutions together. Third, my favorite. This is one of my favorite ones. This is high-level stuff now. This is a punch. If you can throw it, you'll knock them out in the first round or two. It's called plant deficits. What's deficits? Deficits is doubt you plant in the other side's mind that makes them think they need you. That's what planting deficits is. It's the number one example in this culture where there was a negotiation where deficits was planted was Bill Gates versus IBM. Mr. Gates has MS-DOS, the intelligence behind computers. His goal is to control the intelligence behind computers. IBM thinks they're in the computer business. Bill Gates projects that computers will be a commodity one day. That's why he wants to control the intelligence. IBM doesn't really have this view of computers. They don't really view it as a commodity. They're on a negotiation table. Bill Gates bought this MS-DOS, the intellectual property, for $50,000. Property that he's ultimately going to make $3.5 billion with. They go to the negotiation table. Mr. Gates tells IBM, you don't want to be in the software business. What do you want with software? Software changes every couple of years. You want to be in the computer business. Let me be in the software business, and you could stay in the computer business. What did Bill Gates do to IBM, which was a giant at the time, and here he is, a kid coming out of college. What did he do to IBM?
Dropped out of college.
He planted deficits. He planted doubt in IBM's mind that they should even be in the software business, and they ought to do business with him temporarily when he knew he was going to be a long-term player. One of the most important negotiations in our culture, what happened? IBM became a has-been, and Mr. Gates became the richest man in the world. One deal, just because of this concept of planting deficits. Almost all your negotiations revolve around some sort of deficit planting. And what's the counting? So what's a planting deficits? Sometimes you're selling something and the other side convinces you what? That it's all about price. What's the RFP? What are they trying to do? Planting deficits in your mind that you have to come in with the best price. What did those two companies that I talked about that specialize in government contracts do? They didn't respond to this.
They showed value.
They focused on value. So what did they do back? Plant deficits back. That's the counter gambit to planting deficits. When you see someone planting deficits on you, when they try to convince you of something, you try to convince them of something back. Now, one of the most effective strategies of planting deficits is to convince the other side that you're willing to walk away at any time. That's a deficit. If they have the deficit in their mind that this guy can walk away any time, that's powerful. But what can you do to defend yourself against that? Convince the other side that you're willing to walk away at any time. That's the counter gambit to planting deficits.
What did IBM do?
They gave him the deal.
IBM rented out, Bill Gates rented out the software to IBM instead of selling the software to IBM. That's ultimately what happened, because Bill Gates planted deficits and got IBM to think, you're not in the software business, right? Now, if IBM wanted to plant deficits back, IBM would have been like, we're not in the software business, but we are in the business of making money. And if this can make money, we'll buy the product from you and you can consult with us. You'll make a ton of money selling the product to us. We'll give you millions of dollars for the product. You'll make a killing. And you can consult with us and work with us. Now, if Bill Gates became an employee of IBM, what would probably happen to Mr. Gates at some point? Who'd figure it out, huh? Someone said it.
He get fired.
The dark view, but guess what? They'll figure out a way to get rid of him. So, very interesting negotiation. All right, number 4. Let's share 13 strategies. So this says we're sharing. Number 4, flinching. All right, who knows what flinching is?
When somebody gives you a price, you shrug.
You shrug.
When you shrug, they'll drop their price. It's amazing.
Exactly. So someone says it's $10,000, and you say, $10,000? Are you crazy? That's an example of flinching. Very effective. Very effective. And it's kind of related to planting deficits, because it plants deficits in the mind of the other side. $10,000, and you already see the salesperson negotiating. Well, I don't know. It doesn't have to be $10,000. For you, we'll give you $8,000 immediately with one little move. And now all of a sudden, $2,000 is made on the other side. So what do you do to flinching? What's the counter gambit to flinching? Don't pay attention to it.
Don't flinch.
That's okay. $10,000. What do you think it's worth? Get a position from them. Don't react to people emotionally.
I have a better one.
What's that?
Well, if these things are too expensive for someone in your state of life, maybe we should be looking for more affordable products.
More what?
More affordable products for you, that someone like you can afford.
I like to get positions from people. Get the position, because then I could, if it's 10,000 and they say 8,000, then I say, all right, you know what? I don't know if that'll work, but I'll take that back to my partners and see what they have to think.
I'm making.
And you already got them a position from them.
I'm making an ego. If you can't afford it, then you're in the wrong store.
Well, you could do that. That's planting deficits, actually. So, you know, there's multiple ways to do it. There's no one
You gotta
way.
be careful with that, because you can insult somebody and blow the field.
Yeah.
You have to be a lot more subtle about it.
Yeah, that's why I like just to get positions from people so I know where they're at.
Get positioned, that's it.
All right, trade-off methodology. We talked about the trade-off methodology. Make issues of everything. Make issues of everything so that you can trade off. All right? Don't accept just any. Don't accept the offer. Just any offer. Make issues of everything. Everything's an issue. There's 6 issues. Make issue of all 6 issues. We'll take the 6 issues. Make issues of 4. Identify the one that's important to you, though, and then take the 3 that are not important to you and move in the direction of offering them the value that's not important to get the value that is important to you. So that's a trade-off methodology. Counter gambit, be careful what you're trading. Everything is $1. Everything has economic impact. Be careful what you're trading. Maybe the 3 that are not important to you has a $1 symbol on it. Really measure the economics of the deal. Be careful in trading off. Be careful what you trade off. Little mistake here. It's answer a concession with a requested concession. Anytime someone makes a concession, I just want everybody to get into the habit. When someone asks you to make a concession, automatically you should ask for a concession back. Why am I saying that? What effect does that have in the negotiations?
It gives value to the concession that they're giving to you.
So you're controlling the perceived value.
And then you're saying that it's, you know, it's a real, it's got value to me, so if I'm gonna do that for you, you need to do this for me.
Correct. One technique is, if someone wants to make you a concession, you can say, you know, I don't know if we can do that for you. Of course, I have to run that by my partners. But let's just say I could get my partners to go along with this. What can you do for us in return? All right? Don't demand anything. You ask what they're willing to do to try to enhance the value proposition.
You're also protecting the integrity of the original offer. You're saying, this is the deal, but we may have some flexibility. If you can give me some concessions, I can give you some concessions. We have some ways to work around.
All right, now I'll tell you the number one important reason why to ask a concession with a requested concession. Why is that? Here's the number one reason. It stops the grinding away process. Some people are just going to continue and continue and continue and continue. So if every time they request a concession, you're asking for a concession back, they get the hint, you know what, I got to stop asking for concessions. Even subconsciously. So number one reason is you to stop the grinding process away. Very important. Counter gambit to this. Someone's asking concessions back. Give them a concession that's not important to you. Give them a concession. Give them a concession that's not important. Now, if the concession they request is not acceptable to you, you just simply say no, test for validity. So they know we're not going to do that. But in discussions with my partners, we came up with an idea in terms of what to give you back in return. So that's a way to go. Give a concession, but give a concession that's inconsequential, so and it doesn't really detract from your position. All right, higher authority. Who knows what higher authority is? Who's heard? What's higher authority?
So always have to go to somebody else for permission to do the deal.
You should always have a higher authority. A higher authority says this. Someone makes a proposal, and you always have someone you have to kind of run by the proposal. So someone makes a proposal, and you say, you know what? Let me go check out with my partners. Let me run the proposal back with my partners, and we'll get back to you. Let me run it by the home office, and we'll get back to you. Let me run this by the board of directors, and we'll get back to you. Now, here's the key to making high authority work. Make it vague. Don't say, all right, I'm looking at the proposal. Let me run this by Ellen. Because if I say, let me run this by Ellen, what are you going to do now? All right, let's talk to Ellen. So you say, you know what? We'll review the deal, but let me run this by my partners. There's like 5 of them. Let me run it by the board of directors. Let me run it by the committee. Let me run it by the home office. And that's kind of like hard to do. That's like a vague higher authority, and it kind of, what it does is it diffuses the other side's enthusiasm. What's the counter gambit when someone's trying to use a higher authority on you? Call it out and call a meeting for the decision maker. And what you might say is, listen, I know, Gene, you're one of the principals of ABA. I know you have some influence here. What do you think of the proposal? Isolate that person. Now, Gene might say, well, I like it, but I don't know if my partners will like it.
You use that one quite a bit.
Now that I recall.
So then what I try to do is, Gene, who out of all your decision makers in the background, right? Who on the committee is going to be the one responsible for saying yes or no to this? Because this is not the type of decision that a board of directors is going to go and decide on. Who in the committee has the most influential power here? And then the key is to get a person or try to make his higher authority more specific. Another thing I'm going to try to do is, in trying to get Gene or isolating Gene, I'm going to try to get an objection from Gene. Gene might secretly not like the proposal, or he might think the price is too high, or he might think there's an issue. I want to get an objection from Gene so I have something to play with. Because objections are your friends. Objections means that there's a potential deal that could be put on the table. Here's the next one. Very common. Good cop, bad cop. Everyone knows what good cop, bad cop. Person gets arrested, goes into the precinct, and a detective comes out and starts yelling at the criminal who's about to get prosecuted or indicted. Real mean. The detective starts yelling, starts screaming, starts ranting. Then he leaves the room. And then another detective comes in, and he's nice. And he gets the guy coffee, he gets the prisoner water, lets him know, listen, everything is going to be okay. You're going to get your lawyer, we're going to take care of this. Then he starts questioning. He says, so where did you buy the gun? Now what he really wants to know is, where did you bury the body? But he's got to start somewhere. And that's good cop, bad cop. Very effective, because if the prisoner now thinks that the good guy is his friend, he'll reveal more information. Meanwhile, the good cop and the bad cop are on the same team. And that's the strategy. Now, you might think, well, this is easy to read. How many times have you been in a position, or a salesperson's been in a position, or a business person position, where you're talking to someone, to two partners, and one partner clearly doesn't like the proposal and expresses the disdain for the proposal and leaves. And then you have the one who's kind of friendly speaking to you, and you're in a position where you're trying to get the one who's friendly to talk to the bad guy, to the other partner. That happens a lot. Even to smart people, experienced negotiators. You start to think, well, Ellen likes the deal, but Gene doesn't. Ellen, what do you think you could do with Gene? All right? Here's the thing. Gene and Ellen are in the same team. Yeah, they'll have disagreements, but on most things they're on the same page. They're partners. Always assume that. And always look for good cop, bad cop when there's two partners, or two people, or two entities. Always look for it. If someone's bad and someone's good, if someone's mean and someone's friendly, that's a sign that good cop, bad cop is being played on you. What's the counter gambit? It's a good cop, bad cop. I'm going to show you. Here's the most effective way to destroy this strategy. Call it out. Say, Gene, I hope you're not playing good cop, bad cop on me. I mean, you and Ellen have been together for 14 years. The chances of you guys, her being mean and you being nice suddenly is probably unlikely. Listen, why don't we all get back to the table and let's discuss this out like adults. When good cop, bad cop's being played on you, the most effective strategy is just to call it out. In a friendly way. To say, Judy, your partner, come on. Chances of her being that mean-spirited, I understand what you're doing. You're playing good cop bags. I'm very effective strategy in negotiations. I understand. But why don't we just get all on the table and try to work out a deal? Very diffusing. You do it very in a subtle way. There's times where clients use this on us, and we just say, hey, you must be the good cop. Or your partner must be the bad cop. And you just call them. You label them. And then when you speak to them, you say, uh-oh, the bad cop's on the way. Call it out. That's the way to diffuse it. Next, we have 4 more strategies, and we're going to do the Q&A. The assumptive close. The assumptive close is kind of like a fait accompli. What it is you have a deal, and you make a proposal. And what you do is you draft a proposal, and you make it all pretty, and you sign it, and you send it. And you already assume the deal's done, with all the issues in the deal. Very effective, especially if you're friends with the other side. Remember, if you've done a lot of these strategies, if you do it in combinations, it's kind of like boxing. If you throw punches in combination, it'll be very effective. You do this on a friend that really likes you, and then you draft up a contract, and there's fine print within that contract. And you send the contract, and it's signed and delivered, and then you call them, and you say, listen, are you going to get that agreement in? Because we need to start on Tuesday. It's a fait accompli. It's called the assumptive close in sales. I'm not respecting time. I got to finish I'm not going to stop. So, and we'll do Q&A right afterwards. Yes, that was a negotiation. How do you combat the assumptive close? Continue the negotiation. I mean, don't just assume this because they signed it and they said we need to start Tuesday. It doesn't mean there's not substantive issues to discuss. Right? And this goes to the deadlines. I had mentioned this, and I don't want to, never reveal a deadline. It's the biggest mistake that people make. A lot of people, they're in a negotiation, and one of the things is, remember we talked about finding out information. Information is power. If you find out that the other side has a deadline, you have a tremendous amount of leverage on the other side because they're in a time crunch. You can't reveal a deadline. Even if you have a deadline, there's no deadlines. If you miss the flight, take the flight tomorrow. If you miss the train, take the next train. You're in a negotiation. Don't put a deadline on yourself, and certainly don't reveal a deadline. Because if that time pressure is identified from the other side, you're dead in the water. And then, by the way, what kind of power you cannot express if you put a deadline in your head? Walk away power.
How about if you have a real deadline?
You can hold a deadline.
Huh?
How about if you have a real deadline?
A deadline, oftentimes, not in all cases, oftentimes is part of our imagination.
Well, I got construction starting tomorrow, and I got a leak that's happened today. So I need to get that repaired today, or else it's going to cost me a fortune.
Even if that's the case, you should not reveal it if you're in the middle of a negotiation, because you're giving the other side room to do what? To do what? What they might do? What strategy might they use on you if you reveal a deadline? Test for validity.
And then you let them walk.
Alright?
And then you let them walk, and it wasn't a deal to begin with.
Maybe, I don't know. It all depends. I mean, what will happen is people will test you for validity more if they know that you have a deadline. Just like, okay, here's another example. Who's seen The Godfather, the movie?
Yeah.
Right. Who's read the book?
Book's better, right?
By the way, the book is better. The book gives you insight to the actual background that the movie gives you.
Book
now,
is always better.
The book, yeah, oftentimes. Now, there's something in that book that's very interesting. There's 2 concepts in that book. One concept is never make a threat. It's one of the mantras of the Corleone family. Never make a threat. And the other mantra is always be perceived as to be underestimated, and never underestimate someone else. Those are some of the key principles in the book within that family. Never make a threat. And the reason why you never make a threat is what? If you make a threat, what will the other side could do to you? Test for validity. Then what happens to your leverage? You lost it. You're done. You have too much to lose. Funny money. What's funny money? In sales, it's called breaking it down to the ridiculous. You're at 10,000. They're at 15,000. Now we negotiate and it's 12,000. And the salesperson says, come on, it's $2,000. You're gonna use this for a year. If we take $2,000 and we divide it by 365 days, it's only a couple of dollars a day. Let's make the deal and stop screwing around with $20 a day. That's a way to frame the issue, right? And it's a strategy. And it's called funny money. Let's call. How do you combat funny money? Look at everything in terms of dollars. Don't look at it in percentages. Don't look at it as 10% or 8%. Don't look at it as $2 a day, $3 a day. Guess what? It's $1,000. It's $500. And by the way, if you could get them from $1,000 to $800 in 1 hour, Gene, how much money did we make? $1,000 to $800, 1 hour, how much money did we make?
No one said to be
$200.
Yeah, right.
That's about the amount of money I'm going to make with you and your dinner.
You're not there yet.
So the counter gambit to funny money is negotiate dollars, not percentages. Okay, next one. My favorite, or one of my favorites. Disappearing acts. Great movie to think about this. Who's ever seen Superman 2? Christopher Reeves. Hey, remember the scene where you have Superman versus the 3 superpowers. And yeah, the superpower characters. Now there's a battle. And they're fighting, and they're throwing buses at each other. And after a while, it just gets ridiculous, and Superman just pulls a disappearing act. Because he realizes, you know what, I don't have the leverage here. Right? It's very good when you don't have the leverage. He thinks to himself, I don't have the leverage here. I'm going to have to reposition myself on some level and battle these people a little differently. So what does he do? He pulls a disappearing act. And remember the reaction of the city, the people in the city who are like now suffering because of this fight? They're like, where did Superman go? He just left. Just disappeared. That happens in negotiations. Some people pull disappearing acts, and they disappear. And then you hear back from them. And what happens when the person disappears and reappears? What's usually your reaction to them?
Wow. They're grateful.
It's like shock, positive or negative. Sometimes it's, wow, I haven't seen you in a while. Are you even interested in this deal? And sometimes it's anger. So it evokes emotion. So disappearing acts in negotiations is very effective because the person who disappears, what did they demonstrate basically? Literally. They walked away. But then they come back. And they say, you know what? I had a relative that passed away. They'll give you every excuse in the book. I had to leave town. I had a family situation I had to deal with. I couldn't answer my phone. My phone lost reception, whatever. You hear all these excuses, right? But let's talk business. Now, where were we at again? Very effective. Because the other side, the other side's in this state of shock. And you just demonstrated walkaway power without having to say anything. Without having to threat. It wasn't a threat. It was literally an act. It was a demonstration that you could walk away. It's one of the most effective strategies. I've seen these people disappear.
What I found even more effective is when you reappear, it's all about the relationship, not about the deal. You don't even mention the deal. Say, I assume you weren't interested. I got 20 other people I'm working with. Oh, by the way, there's still 1 point left if you're interested, but I really wasn't here.
Yeah, well,
I'm not really here to talk about the deal. I'm really here just to make sure we're cool as friends. Or whatever the relationship is the most important thing.
Counter gambit to disappearing acts, find another deal. If someone disappears on you, just get another deal. Because if they reappear and you have another deal,
you got more leverage.
How many times, this is now a relationship thing, has anybody been in a situation where they break up with somebody, right? In a personal relationship, they break up with somebody, right? In a romantic relationship, you break up with somebody. And you break up with them, and then 6 months later, you want to go back to them. And when you go back to them, they're already dating someone else. Who's ever been in that situation in their life?
On the other side, though. My wife asked me to come back, and I said, don't hang up. That was it.
That's it.
So I was at that.
it's shocking for the person to disappear, then come back and then find out that you have another deal. It's an extraordinary effective counter gambit to that. So disappearing acts can work very well, but when they come back and you have another deal already, now you can now you can negotiate them and renegotiate a better deal for yourself that you originally had because hey, I was offering you 15, now I have someone at 17. I'm not going to give you 15. In fact, you disappeared for 2 weeks. All right, 12, and I have one more after this, and we're going to do Q&A. 12. This is very important. This gives you I'm going to give you a clue of why immigrants, right, people from other countries, could be very effective in negotiations, and it's really a matter of how they view the contract. It's called the conditional contract. This is what the conditional contract is. Me and Jim Ferme, we have a contract. We make a deal. Maybe. Now everyone's going to be reluctant to make deals with me after this workshop. But here it is. Jim Ferme, me and Jim have a deal. We come up with a price, right? And there's a contract. We shake hands. Now we do a deal. There's a concept. Jim, now me and him might have a deal, and I might view myself as having a contract, but Jim might say, wait a minute, there's conditions to the contract. In order for me to pay X price, certain things have to happen. So there's conditions. So in the United States, we kind of negotiate from the contract. From our standpoint is if we have a deal, we're going to put it in writing, we get lawyers involved, we have a deal. But a real competent negotiator knows that every contract could be renegotiated. Because the contract is only as good as the conditions that were present when the signing took place. So it's called the conditional contract. Look at every deal that you make as renegotiable if the conditions in which that existed while the contract was made are non-existent. Now athletes do this all the time. You have a football player or a baseball player who gets drafted. And they get drafted and they're making $200,000 a year playing for the Yankees or the Mets or the Giants or whatever team, right? But then in the first year or two, they become a superstar. Meanwhile, they signed this contract, this long-term contract at a low pay. So what does their agent do? Their agent says, you're the best player in the league in a short period of time. We need to renegotiate this contract, and you need to let them know that you're willing to hold out on them if they don't renegotiate, because you're the best player in the league. And when they signed you, you were just a rookie player coming out of high school. Well, those conditions are no longer existent, therefore we need to renegotiate the contract. Right? So that's called conditional contract. Counter gambit. Stick to the contract. We say, wait a minute. When we drafted you, Mr. Ball Player, we understood that there was a possibility for you to become a superstar because that's why we signed you. And we all know that if you continue this performance, at some point this contract will expire and we'll pay you the rate at that time. But we made a deal. Let's stick to our deal. Outside the United States, the contract is not considered, or is not taken that seriously. Outside the United States, the attitude, the prevalent attitude is that contracts are conditional, where in the United States, we kind of take the contract a lot more seriously. So, conditional contract, counter gambit, stick to the contract, and last but not least, answer a low ball with a low ball. Sometimes negotiations take place, someone makes you a low ball offer, so then you negotiate and you negotiate back with a low ball offer. Great example, Godfather 2. Remember in the beginning, the opening scene. It's Michael Corleone and the senator. And the senator makes some outrageous offer. And Michael's response is, Senator, I have an offer for you. How about nothing? What was he doing? Low ball with a low ball. Why? Because when you answer a low ball with a low ball, what you're expressing to the other side is that their position is unreasonable. And we're going to be at our low ball position until you get reasonable. So, what's the counter gambit? Stick to your low ball until the other side becomes reasonable. So those are the 13 strategies and counter chess moves.